Hello everyone, today we're just going to be continuing our top 100 NBA players ranking with spots 60 to 51. Really just like the first real section of guys that I view as stars in this league. Just super talented guys who just aren't in that top echelon of guys just yet in the league, but guys that still bring very respectable talents and guys that bring tons of firepower to either end of the floor. And I have no doubt that there will be heaps of criticism and confusion with a few of these picks that I've got of the guys that do land here on this tier. But with my criteria and how I value basketball impact, I do have these guys landing here in this still what should be considered a very elite zone. And with that, we have today starting our list with LaMelo Ball, someone who is probably typically viewed as your high talent but low impact type of guy. Someone who doesn't really have much of a value for winning at this point in his career. And the thing with Melo that's really hard to judge is just how much he means to a franchise, and especially with the Hornets over the past few years. I mean, obviously Charlotte is at their best when Melo is on the court. They have a plus 9.5 point differential per 100 possessions, which is very, very good. But in terms of his actual play style itself, it's very inefficient. And though they're not a very good team, grasping onto whatever talent that they do have will generally make them better. That's why when LaMelo is on the floor, they are better than without him. In terms of like the actual play style, there's tons of just terrible shot selection, just erratic reads, just unnecessary pace spiking that hasn't proven to lead to great team results. And that really is just the main drawback with LaMelo. And before people talk about the talent surrounding him, that doesn't really factor. Like, he hunts low efficiency early shot clock reads because he simply doesn't really have the strength and elite downhill reaction processing to hunt those gaps with consistency. And he does have an agile frame, but he doesn't look to weaponize it nearly enough to what he could be. In this past year in 2025, he shot under 50% effective field goal percentage, which for a volume scoring guard is pretty abysmal, and his inability to actually create and manufacture those efficient and effective passing windows with continuous advantage creation perks, that does really diminish his value as such a high usage basketball player. He had a usage rate this past year of 34.2%, and that ranked him second behind only Giannis in the NBA. And I think you're expecting a lot more from someone that you're giving so much of an investment into. And then you talk about my other factors of my criteria. I mean, the lack of portability and contributions on the margins, that's kind of why he does rank so low. And he legitimately may be one of the worst defensive guards in basketball, and that does not help his case whatsoever. And the only reason why I'm really digging into the negativity for this spot is really just because I know people are going to argue for him to be higher. Obviously, his highlights are extremely fun to watch, and he just came off a season averaging 25, 5, and 7. And that does attract the casual eye, but there are real issues with his actual basketball impact on the NBA scale, considering the role that he's targeting for himself. And in saying all this negative stuff, there is still an absolute ton to love. You know, the ceiling is fun, especially when the shot making is surging. He has real range on his jumper, and he has proven his talent time and time again as a pull-up jump shooter in general. And I do crap on the inability to dice up those easy passing lanes continuously, but LaMelo's actual passing talent is freaky. You talk about the audacity, that does provide diminishing returns, but in terms of the actual talent that we're reviewing here, the over-the-top advantages, the reaction speed, to even the slightest angles that open up, that just makes him this high-ceiling offensive generator. And though he isn't particularly efficient in any play type that he initiates, his actual potential with the speed and acceleration that he can hit with that size, hunting those release windows on his jumper, you know, he's just an incredibly fun player to watch, and he can lead to high-tier offensive performances every now and then, and that really is why he is considered a star in this league. And look, I think most people are higher on LaMelo than I am, and that's really more to do with the talent than it is on the impact scale, which is how I like to view things. So with that, he still ranks for me as a star in the NBA, but he ranks here at number 60 to open up our segment today. Now, moving on to number 59, we have Jrue Holiday, someone who stands as one of the best role players in the league, and for that real purpose, he does qualify as a star because the defensive baseline that a guy like Jrue Holiday can help offer to a team at the point of attack, still with the added load that he can frequently take, in terms of the offensive side of the ball, and with the history that he has as a smart and physical driver, and like some real credibility on that jumper. Like, he's just one of those guys that provides immense value on multiple different sections of the floor, and that is why I consider him so highly here. And with Jrue's timeless defensive greatness, it's mainly to do with the mix of elite lateral movement. Talk about the elite strength, the physical absorption. All of those things just make him absolutely special. And there aren't many guys that can accurately move with the same reaction processing like what Jrue Holiday does in the NBA. Talk about the angle prediction. You talk about the balanced footwork. All of that allows him to absorb so much contact against these drive-heavy types of scorers. And he's just, in terms of like the actual balance on his stabilized frame, that just allows him to remain balanced at all times defensively. And it's really hard to shake off a guy like him. There aren't many guys that can harass and invade space like Jrue as well. And that really is a testament to his level of discipline. And when you add in the fast hands, the strong core, and that strong base that he has, and really, you just have one of the most gifted perimeter defensive guards of all time, and someone that's still giving that sort of value in that role that he's playing in right now. And adding on to that, I mean, like, he's extremely switchable, extremely flexible with guarding in different schemes and different archetypes as well. And there's just so much value that you can grasp from someone so versatile on the perimeter. And there are only a handful of guys that can provide that diverse value on the perimeter. Like, you talk about guys like Alex Caruso. Jrue Holiday might be number 2 in terms of the versatility of his impact as a guard defender. But besides from the defense, like, removing ourselves from here, in terms of like the offensive role that he can hold, though he hasn't really put up fantastic numbers, especially in the past 2 seasons, we know Jrue Holiday is a very capable ball handling prospect out of this star role player crop that we're reviewing here. In terms of like the mature pick and roll initiation as either a ball handler or setting inverted picks, that just adds to the versatility of his frame and the portability of his talent. His feel for the game off ball, means that he's always going to be providing you plus offensive value on the margins. He has elite movement in space, being able to fill in gaps, extending advantages, using his size to punish smaller guards or uncoordinated bigs. Talk about the work around the baseline, hunting for those drop-offs on his cuts. Just the intelligence and the leadership qualities itself just allow him to milk the game on the margins as a guard in this league. And though many of these qualities were really mostly seen from last time in the 2024 NBA Finals and not so much on display in the playoffs that we just had in 2025, I still think Jrue Holiday just brings so much immense positive value in any game, in any situation. And for me, therefore, he is a star with the defensive superpowers that he brings night to night. Now, moving up to number 58, we have still a stout rim protector and possession-gaining monster with someone who brings so much work on the glass with his sheer size, mobility, strength, and coordinated feel. And in terms of just fighting for positioning, there's not many guys that do it better than this guy, and that is Rudy Gobert. In terms of Rudy's value, it's significantly dropped in terms of the defensive impact in the past year. He's no longer contributing to an elite number 1 ranked defense anymore. His impact metrics aren't as eye-popping as previously, and though still a high-level defensive anchor option, he just isn't as valuable a commodity amongst the league, especially with growing anchors who just have a bit more offensive skill on the floor overtaking him here. However, though, in saying this, I mean, many of those qualities that we saw most recently in especially 2024, they're still 100% present today. And the lack of matchup versatility to the level of other elite NBA rim protectors is the main reason he has dropped. Talk about the leapfrogging of talents amongst the league, but in terms of the actual cognitive positioning strengths that Rudy Gobert brings to the game, there are not many that can come close to him besides guys like maybe Draymond Green. In terms of the timing of the reaction speed on his step-up, help, and recovery possessions, there, again, not many guys that can actually really replicate this. And he has seen so much across the league that his defensive mind, is just so immensely polished on this front. His drop coverage, still absolutely elite. And against whatever narrative says about Rudy, I mean, his ability to survive on the perimeter, still on switches and containing at the level, it's relatively polished, especially when he has that strong frame where he can absorb contact if he can successfully wall off his opponents. In terms of like the footwork, the balance is so developed at this point, and his hands on the perimeter as well, poking handles, it's gotten better and better each year now. And flipping to the screening activity, you talk about the mobility, you talk about the strength, the angles that he grants his ball handlers at such an extreme level. And obviously on the play finishing side, there isn't overly much to be enthused about. And obviously he does leave a lot to be desired as far as like the advanced shot touch, even at the rim, and that still does lack a ton. And there is like no life of value handling on the perimeter, even as, you know, even those DHOs that he tries to run are still relatively unsteady. He's still got the raw and undeveloped handle. I know he's a very flawed player, but that's never really been what Rudy Gobert can bring to the game offensively. He's an elite level physical athlete at the center position who has dominated his designated role as an elite rebounder, as one of the premier positional based rim protectors in the league, and one of the best exceptional backline communicators and leaders in the NBA, and he's done that for the Minnesota Timberwolves for quite a few years now, and he still ranks here in this star impact zone. Now moving to number 57, we've got DeMar DeRozan, someone who is still one of the most efficient pull-up jump shooters in the NBA today, someone who still has great advantageous tools with the physicality and the grown strength and the athleticism that he still has. You talk about the elevation, the protected jumper in his arsenal as well, and that's really what the draw is around DeMar at the moment, the half-court value that he brings. He's a strong possession-based shot creator, and there is a ton of value in that. He's still one of the best high-volume isolation and pick-and-roll creators in basketball, and the type of touch that we're looking for in DeMar, the type of touch, soft feel, muscle memory looks on those movement jumpers is just such a commodity to find around the league when you're trying to find guys that can thrive in possession-based basketball, which is the type of look that you're trying to go for in the postseason. And in terms of the efficient aspect, I mean, DeMar just shot the third highest percentage on all pull-up looks at 47.2%, and he only trailed behind Ty Jerome and Kevin Durant for guys that took at least 250 attempts last year. And the only real drawback with this shot-taking piece for DeMar is that it doesn't boost aggregate efficiency as much as other mid-range assassins like KD, SGA, and Brunson, because he just lacks the extended touch from beyond the three, and it's pretty much far from polished, and he hasn't really worked on it too much, and he hasn't really made it a staple of his game in the past few years, and that does limit him when we are comparing him as a scorer to these other elite guys. But that's really where the limitation starts, and that's why we ultimately have him here at number 57, despite being so absurdly efficient at his mastered skill. And when you factor in the lack of passing capitalization, to about the lower tier of rim pressure that he brings compared to some of these other guys, naturally it is harder to jump into that upper echelon of offensive stars. And that is why many teams have passed up on his talents over the years, especially as he has been aging, and that ability to weaponize those athletic traits that he had, they really have declined over the years. He's not the same slasher or driver that he was in Toronto. And as far as this playoff scaling, in theory, I mean, you'd think someone with DeMar's skill set would translate with some sort of playoff resilience. But the truth is he just hasn't been the most consistent performer throughout his entire career. And though the three-point shooting does bring a ton of variance, which can create inconsistency, and that's a big knock on a lot of guys around the league. Like we just talked about LaMelo in terms of just the poor range shot selection, that does prove so much inconsistency in your overall offensive impact. You know, the lack of variety for DeMar, though, in this sense, that does hold him back. Not being able to even really lean on threes at some point. Not like, you know, just generally hunting in the intermediate zone. That does hold him back in terms of like the room and the level of space that he's given to work with. And that does limit the amount of comfort and overall rhythm that he can attain, especially as the playoff physical intensity does tend to kick in. And that's when defenses really do spike that physical motor that they bring to the game. And that does make DeMar struggle from time to time, being so reliant on the intermediate zone. But besides that, the case is really that not many guys can score the ball off the dribble to the level of DeMar. And that's why he does rank here in this star zone. He's just got such a dependable arsenal when it comes to using his strength to back down opponents. He can fade on either shoulder over the top with a consistent feathery touch that he's proven year in and year out. In terms of the excellence as a jump shooter in motion, all that shooting stuff, I think that lands him enough to be in this top 60 star zone. and he still gives you very, very respectable impact. Number 56, we have stepping up one-time All-Star Jarrett Allen. Someone who last year was contributing quite strongly to a resilient two-way squad, more with the higher level functional mobility that he brings to the squad. And he's just got a bit more added skill that he has on that touch and that finishing arsenal off the roll. You know, he's a guy that can provide respectable gravity out of two-man actions, and that is why he ranks above guys like Rudy Gobert here. And obviously, Jarrett hasn't really ever been someone that you can rely on with the creation stuff on the block. He doesn't really just have that fluidity in his movement and the comfortability to be able to flourish, getting to those advantageous fades and hook shots and fighting for positioning. But what Jarrett does bring is some really strong soft feel that most anchors simply can't provide, and there definitely is true value with that. And in terms of the efficiency of his skill set, I mean, Jarrett Allen has quietly posed himself as one of the best interior starting bigs in basketball. I mean, he's always active offensively as a screener. Obviously, he's a very active off the roll. He's an 87th percentile roll man. Very selective post-up guy, scoring the ball at 1.58 points per possession. And he may be the best cutting big in basketball, playing off the extreme advantage creation that he has from Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. And he's just got such a powerful ability to catch and rise with great timing on his dives. And he's just a super athletic, just a superb athletic center across the league. And flipping to the other side of the ball, I mean, defensively, you're getting a solid build, someone who does have relatively sturdy, switchable feet, strong drop coverage asset as well, someone who won't frequently be caught out in cross matches either. He has enough lateral balance overall to be able to survive out on the perimeter fairly strongly, and he also brings elite rebounding tools, very credible shot contester at the rim as well. He's just got enough athleticism in there to offer those late contests from those low coverages, which does make him a very passable defender. And so with the portability that Jarrett Allen brings to the table, I think in terms of his ability to be able to be slotted next to any sort of star guard pretty relatively seamlessly, I mean, that just provides impact in multiple avenues. And in terms of defensively, his ability to uphold himself to the physical scale of playoff basketball with the physicality that he brings, I think Jarrett Allen is one of the top tier anchors in basketball. And whether you think he's a star or not, he's one of the at least best role players that you can get in the NBA. And he just had a terrific season with the one-seeded Cleveland Cavaliers last season. Now, number 55, we're going to move on through these relatively fast. We have Scottie Barnes who lands here, someone who we all know how talented he really is. He's a unique post-up capable forward, someone who brings a ton of intriguing physical mobility. He brings a ton of length, just that power, those agile traits as well for his 6'7" frame. Just a really good build and really nicely developed physical specimen in the league. And in terms of the raw diverse production, I mean, Scottie's basic numbers already pop out immediately. He gives you 19 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, and 2.5 stocks per game. And really, the common trend that we're looking for is versatile two-way impact, and that allows your overall value to be matchup resilient. And with Scottie, I mean, defensively, you are getting one of the most talented forward builds of this era, and that comes with no over-exaggeration. I mean, you talk about the strength, the rangy wingspan, talk about those long lateral strides, the methodical sliding, and staunching space containment. All of that just make him so useful against these power-based scorers. And it's hard to find forwards with the length that can cover the space, but also have the base strength to be able to battle positioning. And that really is just the special blend that Scottie Barnes brings on the defensive end. But it's also the offensive contributions that he's going to give you. I mean, the contributions to movement offense, that's what makes him special. And yes, he can work from the post, which as an agile forward has its own embedded advantages for a team offense, but he brings so much more ball movement advantages, just screening versatility, mobile cutting into space, which gives him value with a relatively versatile shot touch that he has. And he just projects to be a 3-level scorer in the future. And that's, once the polish comes, he will be a very, very big star in this league. And not yet though, he's not elite at any one skill yet, and that does mightily hold him back here. But I mean, Scottie Barnes affects the game in just so many areas, and he contributes on the margin so heavily that he's always seamlessly giving you value just with the mobility that he brings with the physical size. And the value in his build alone with the high intensity motor that he brings night to night he's just made himself an extremely productive player in the NBA, and he's so young, and the talent that he poses for Toronto as their best player for the future is just so appealing. And moving on to number 54, we have another Toronto Raptors player, just someone who is a certain star in this league, someone who has had extreme inconsistency with his time on the floor, but then again, someone who is a more complete offensive player in this short realm of these higher echelon pull-up jump shooters that we have, and that is Brandon Ingram. And when I really talk about complete, I'm not referring to like just the scoring arsenal, because that is really something that does hold Brandon Ingram back in these talks. You know, he does lack a lot of that rim pressure, lacks a lot of those physical advantages, and sometimes has an over-reliance on those tough mid-range looks as, you know, his level of offensive stability. But what really makes Brandon Ingram a complete offensive ball handler is really just the passing chops that he brings. I mean, he's routinely one of the best passing forwards in our league with obvious over-the-top passing advantages. But genuinely, he just has these plus mobility traits as well for his size, just the speed that he can bring and torch bigs with from frequent time to time. And with the speed and agile weapons that he has, I mean, he can frequently use his actual frame to dig deeper into lanes and spray out to initiate that first piece of ball movement. And that is what makes Brandon Ingram a special player. Much of the playmaking value obviously comes from off-ball movement. I mean, Ingram is someone who is constantly running off screens, constantly cutting, presenting for post entries, and providing value hunting for favorable matchups where he can predominantly flex the height and the high release on his jumper. And that really is the superpower that you're getting with Ingram. I mean, you talk about the more mature level of initiation, just with the elite intermediate shot making on those tough looks, providing strong half-court possession value. I mean, 2 seasons ago, because obviously last season we only saw 18 games from Brandon Ingram. I mean, 2 years ago he was making over 48% of his looks from the mid-range, making 46% of his pull-up looks. And that really is just the main strength in his game and what makes him just a rare athlete in the NBA. And obviously he does have injury concerns, and there is a lack of physical upside that does hold him back, especially when we are thinking of playoff scaling. But in terms of his offensive initiation, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's relatively proven. He's been doing this for about 5 years now, and his game continues to age decently well. And therefore, Brandon Ingram has earned his spot here at number 54, and I still view him as a star in this league. Moving on to number 53, we have a more gravitational off-ball scorer. Someone who comes in here, someone that just provides a greater contribution to aggregate team efficiency, and that is Zach LaVine. Someone who is an ultra-confident movement shooter. You know, Zach is someone that provides tons of credible off-the-dribble pop, and he still frequently showcases the athletically flexing plays as well. That does make him a stronger, pure scoring option in the league. You talk about the ability to get downhill, and even you're just talking about 3-level scorers in general. I mean, Zach LaVine definitely is up there. I mean, this is someone who was an elite isolation scorer just last season, an absolute pick-and-roll machine, exceptional transition athlete, elite spot-up scorer, someone who just provides exceptional off-ball value. I mean, he was putting up some very credible numbers out of handoff and off-screen actions as well with his movement shooting and the crazy balanced shot-making structure that he provides to motion looks. And in terms of providing real downhill juice as well, he's got a strong frame, still extremely explosive first step off the catch as well, and his drives are just made that much more effective because of his ability to leverage what he has as a high-volume shot maker. And so when we're ranking, the purest scorers in the league, having a skilled and extremely versatile arsenal like LaVine, just having so much that he can depend on, and he's been someone who's been able to put together some truly special seasons in terms of the efficiency part. And just last season, I mean, you talk about the basic stat line, he averaged 23, 4, and 4 on 51, 45, 83 splits, which came to a truly remarkable 61% effective field goal percentage, something that not many players can ever dream of replicating. And when someone is so tremendously efficient in his regard as a scorer, I mean, you'd think of them on the higher tier of stars around the league. But obviously in LaVine's case, the reason why he does land down here is just the poor passing volume and capitalization as well, similar to DeMar, especially he hasn't been able to capitalize on his gravity as much, and that does take a heap away from that offensive engine feel that he might be able to bring to a team. And He doesn't always contribute to connectivity like other top-tier efficiency-based scorers in our league, like your Steph Currys, like your SGAs, like your Lukas. And with very average defensive impact as well, I just don't think he really provides much on the margins to a team. But in saying that though, obviously we know he has an incredible scoring toolkit, and therefore he does pose as a more portable asset in the league. But just someone who ultimately just can't be tasked with high tolling roles. And at best, on a championship team, he might be a tertiary option as that third star. And though that can even be questioned as well, I mean, just the versatility of impact does matter a lot in this league. And that is why his standing is limited on a competitive list like this. But not many guys can actually do as much as Zach LaVine can do on and off the ball as a scoring weapon in this league. So that's why he does rank here at number 53. Now moving on to someone who has dropped significantly as well from last year due to a multitude of reasons. Someone who really just another staggering dip in the availability realm as well as just poor offensive production relative to expectations. And that is the aging but still extremely impactful Paul George. I mean, PG obviously aged like so much in these past 12 months to with the build-up of constant injury nags that just hasn't allowed him to have any sort of rhythm. But in terms of the multiple flashes that we saw from PG when he was healthy, we can still definitely see the talent that he still has as one of the premier shot hunters with real advantageous physical tools that do allow him to create quality offense as a volume pull-up jump shooter. PG, still a very good isolation scorer. He still gets you 1.03 points per possession in isolation possessions, and a very polished spot-up option as well next to Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. He just brings those over-the-top advantages. He just has such pristine shooting mechanics as well that still give him a boost. And though the overall efficiency has seen a substantial dip, I mean, PG just separates himself with the fully polished skill set that allows him to actually step up and provide 1A offensive bursts from time to time. He just brings that physical separation piece, just has a level of tough shot making and a fully diversified shot chart that not many guys can even dream of replicating still in the NBA. And obviously tough shot making isn't what places someone like Paul George so high on this list. It's also being able to provide that impact in multiple areas, which I keep harping on. And besides the extra value that you're getting from the ball handling strengths, the polished passing, I mean, PG just still poses himself as a tremendous defender on the wing. Just so strong, lateral anticipation, just crisp hand activity, just an ability to disturb handoffs and pass receptions with his length and accurate movement, tracking players off ball. And he still does this at such a high level. Last season, PG averaged the third most deflections and the second most steals per game from anyone that played a minimum of 40 games last year. And that does make him an extremely reliable defensive playmaker, just with his IQ and the continuous awareness that he brings to the floor. And in terms of just the physical base that he has, at a strong 6'8", 220 pounds, just so much grown man power behind him at age 35, that does make him more resilient to lengthy wings and higher ball pressure defenders as well when we're talking about the offensive piece. And that does make him more matchup resilient than most of those pull-up archetype of scorers. And therefore, despite a down year in this past year and a pretty poor season in terms of the production, I mean, PG is still a special player in this league, and he does knock on the door of this top 50 spot at number 52. Now, to finish off today's segment, we're going off with number 51, someone which may spin a few heads. We have Ja Morant, someone who may be the most surprising player that I've ranked so far, just in terms of where I think fans expect him to be regarded. But for me, in terms of just the past few years, I mean, we've really just been exposed as to how capped of a team ceiling that you can ultimately have with Ja Morant running your offense. And that's why he does land here in the bottom 50 of this top 100 list. For me, I think a big misconception about Morant being a superstar type of talent is mainly due to those Grizzlies squads from a few years back. Those teams just having real success back-to-back seasons as a 2 seed in the West. But I think what people do sometimes forget is just how good that defense was. In those 2 years, that Grizzlies team were a top 4 both years in steals, blocks, rebounds, field goals attempted, offensive boards, transition possessions, and in 2023, I mean, they ranked 3rd in defensive rating. And so basically, when you're reviewing those teams from a few years ago, you're looking at one of the most dominant teams on the margins that we've seen in the past few years. A team that completely dominated just with their perimeter physicality and getting out in lanes, whilst being a dominantly aggressive rebounding team as well, which did give them a tremendous regular season baseline. Yes, Morant was a high volume transition guy, but much of that success and high floor was established by their system and their commitment to winning the possession battle every single night with the energetic youth that they had on the roster. And though Morant himself, as the initiator of this team, I just don't think he really ever proved to be brightly efficient in his half-court actions enough to satisfy him being viewed as a superstar in this league. I mean, in terms of the half-court efficiency piece that you're supposed to bring as an offensive engine, that is supposed to be the biggest trait that you bring as a superstar level guy. And you need to bring this to any team. And even through the past year, I mean, we've only seen just how high Morant pick and roll basketball can only really lead to average team offense at best. And that is really because of the lack of diversity and the ease at which defenses can cover his game. And overall, just an extremely poor shooter in general from every single facet of the floor. And he's now 26 years old, and he still hasn't been able to put together much consistency as a pull-up jump shooter even. And defensively as well, he's extremely hunted. And with an inability to contribute as an off-ball asset to a high level, I mean, Morant just hasn't been able to raise his individual ceiling in a league that does respect diversity of impact above everything else. And in saying this, Ja is still certainly one of the most talented, athletically gifted rim pressures in basketball. Tremendous downhill passer through angles and crevices when he does create those slight windows. And he's someone who can lean on the insane body contortion, the agile frame that he brings to be able to get those favorable angles at the rim over less mobile rim protectors who simply can't contend with him vertically. And we are looking at one of the most athletic players of all time, someone who can weaponize those gifts very admirably. And despite average efficiency and team offensive initiation, in the post-All-Star break, we saw Ja Morant put together an 18-game span averaging 28, 4, and 7. And anyone who can provide this volume of production should get respect as a star in this league. But for me, the limitations of him as a guy who actually has to be a team's 1A for him to be a valuable asset to a team, it's just not appealing for any team to construct a winning roster around him. And he just brings a poor team impact option as a 1A offensive engine option. And that is where we did see the Grizzlies flourish. I mean, in the first half of last season, we saw Coach Taylor Jenkins really just prioritizing that more team-orientated drive, relocate, space utilization, those cutting fundamentals. And we saw them land as a top 3 seed in the first half of the year. And when after the Jenkins firing happened, I mean, we saw the Grizzlies revert back to so much of this high-dosage Morant pick-and-roll basketball, and we saw that only really lead to below-average results. And that did really tend to bite Memphis towards the back end of last season, and that is really why I do have Ja Morant this low compared to consensus expectations. Just the inability to provide any sort of value on any other sort of margin besides the rim pressure and passing piece. I know it's a spectacular skill that he does have, but that does really just limit how much you can bring to a team overall. And with that does mark our first half of the top 100 list. I'll be trying to smash through the second half fairly fast. I know it's a long list, but now we are starting to get to the interesting ranks and opinions that I do have, and where we do see the real stars in the league fighting for the top spots in such a talent-driven league. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I'll see you guys in the next one.